What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, it's Saturday, you know what time it is. It's time to dive into those quarterbacks and tight ends. We are switching things up a little bit from last week. Nothing major, we're still going to go through the starts and the sits, but this time we are going to discuss a couple polarizing players at each position. On top of that, we also expanded the start and sit list. If that wasn't good enough, we made our entire website completely free, rankings and all. And with quarterbacks, with tight ends, it's super simple. If they're ranked ahead of the other, that is literally the player we would start. The rankings on the website are of course going to be updated with the important actives and inactives that could greatly impact how the rankings pan out. We don't really have the ability to do that on video, so take advantage of it while it's free. The link for that, it's in the description box below. With that being said, let's hop over to the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which quarterback currently leads the league in deep pass attempts. The correct answer is Aaron Rodgers. Congratulations, Coach Dan, you got this one right. As for today's stat of the day, which wide receiver with at least 5 targets inside the 10-yard line currently boasts the league's best catch rate in that area of the field? Once again, that's which wide receiver with at least 5 10-zone targets currently has the best catch rate. Leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Alright guys, we're moving over to the tight end position. Before we do get into the starts and sits though, I did want to quickly discuss 2 polarizing players at that position. They come into week 14 with a significant amount of question marks. No surprise here, Dallas Goedert and Jonnu Smith. Starting with Dallas Goedert, just to lay the facts out, we have the quarterback change from Carson Wentz to Jalen Hurts. While it's hard to imagine anyone outside of Carson Wentz could be a downgrade at this moment, we really can't be certain exactly how that's going to impact Dallas Goedert. As we know, with a new quarterback stepping in, the target distribution's always going to shake up a bit, but Dallas Goedert, he is an elite talent, so that fact on its own isn't steering me away from starting him in this matchup. We also have to ask ourselves, how many snaps is Zach Ertz going to be playing compared to last week? In week 13, Zach Ertz's first game back, he played in a total of 27 snaps. That's a number that was nearly doubled for Dallas Goedert, coming in with 52 offensive snaps. This is a clear indication that the Philadelphia Eagles are attempting to ease Ertz in. It's more than likely Zach Ertz is going to get an increased workload from this week as opposed to last week, which could potentially increase the volatility for a player like Dallas Goedert. It is worth noting though that younger or inexperienced quarterbacks do tend to lean on the tight end position at a much higher rate, but heading into week 14, he has a matchup against the New Orleans Saints, who've been absolutely fire at defending opposing tight ends. The last time that the New Orleans Saints allowed a receiving touchdown to a tight end was all the way back in week 5. They've also held opposing tight ends to 1 or less receptions in 5 of the last 7 games, excluding 1 game through that same span. The high in receiving yardage for any tight end facing the New Orleans Saints is a mere 15 receiving yards. So when we're taking into account all of those factors surrounding Dallas Goedert this week, my overall expectations for him, they're pretty low. Don't get me wrong though, I'm also not sitting here telling you to grab anybody off the waiver wire and play him ahead of him, but considering that Dallas Goedert hasn't been available for most teams for a large stretch of this season, it's definitely possible that one of you out there does have a player that we have ranked ahead of Goedert sitting on your bench. Moving over to Jonnu Smith though, we almost have the complete opposite situation. Jonnu Smith, of course, returning from the injury. Due to missing that game, he's finding himself on a lot of waiver wires, which brings into the question, what can we expect from Jonnu Smith in week 14? Well, he has a really solid matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. This game has one of the higher projected totals on the week, but not only that, they do have the second highest implied team total, which means there should be more touchdowns to go around, a very positive sign for a tight end who's gained most of his production in that area. So for him to return and face a team that's allowed 9 receiving touchdowns to tight ends on the season, the same team that he had a multi-TD game in earlier on in the season. So overall, I would say Jonnu Smith makes one of the premier desperation plays at the tight end position. Alright guys, we're going to move over to the other starts we have at the tight end position. These are going to be a handful of players that we think have a very positive matchup for Week 14. What you'll see here is our rankings for Week 14 at the time of recording. Keep in mind these are subject to change, so if you want the most up-to-date information, you're going to have to go to the website, link in description, but we're going to go in order, and to start, tight end 4, we have Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews heads into this matchup with a significant amount of safety as well as upside. He faces Cleveland, that has allowed the second most fantasy points to tight ends. At the rate they're going, and possibly after this week, they may even fall further than that to allow the most fantasy points to the position. We've seen this defense allow a very high end of production. In fact, in 5 games so far this season, the Cleveland Browns have allowed 20 plus fantasy points to a tight end in a PPR scoring format. If that wasn't good enough, the Cleveland Browns have allowed a double-digit fantasy performance to tight ends in each of the past 6 weeks, and they are now going on their 4th consecutive week in which they're allowing a receiving touchdown to a tight end. Moving over to tight end 5, Noah Fant. This week he faces the Carolina Panthers. Carolina, they have been susceptible to getting beat by the tight end position throughout this entire season. Now heading into this matchup, they'll be without DJ Moore, likely Christian McCaffrey as well, which brings into question how well will this offense operate with those missing pieces. Any lack of production offensively is going to lead to more opportunities for the Denver offense. Increased opportunities are going to increase the potential for Noah Fant in this matchup, which isn't even necessary because he's already getting a top 6 matchup. Tight end 7, we have Hunter Henry. Yes, he is coming off of a bad performance against New England, but when it comes to what we're expecting in Week 14, we almost have to throw that out. Heading into this week, he gets a much softer matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. Herbert should have absolutely no problem pushing this ball down the field using Keenan Allen as well as Mike Williams. So when combined with a defense ranking in the bottom 5 against tight ends on a team that should see plenty of scoring opportunities, I'd say Hunter Henry has a really solid chance to score. In the last time we saw him face a defense weak against that position, he had a whopping 10 targets. The defense I'm referring to is the Buffalo Bills, which makes a perfect segue into our next tight end 11, Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron fittingly has had 11 targets in each of the past 2 games. While expecting Eric Ebron to once again get double-digit targets, not really realistic, the Buffalo Bills have allowed 7 plus receptions in 3 of their past 4 games. If Ben Roethlisberger does dish out the ball in Eric Ebron's direction anywhere near the amount that he has been over the past 2 weeks, Eric Ebron should have a very safe floor in this matchup, which we really can't undervalue in the fantasy playoffs where it's win or go home. The final tight end start we have Dalton Schultz, currently ranked 15th. He's coming into one of the best possible matchups we could ask for. It's against the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati has been competing for one of the worst teams at defending that position and have even allowed 100 plus receiving yards in back-to-back matchups to tight ends. In Week 13 versus Miami, they allowed 11 receptions, 104 yards, even a receiving touchdown. Very rarely on the season has a tight end completely busted against this defense, and with Dalton Schultz proving to have a safe workload week over week, it definitely makes Schultz one of the safer options in this range. Alright guys, we're going to move over to the sit tight ends, and to lead this list, we have Hayden Hurst of the Atlanta Falcons. No, I'm not really down on Hayden Hurst just because he underperformed against a tough New Orleans Saints defense. No, the reason I'm fading Hayden Hurst more has to do with the matchup against the Chargers. While on paper, the Chargers rank around middle of the pack at defending the position, a lot of the production given up has come in the form of touchdowns. In fact, the LA Chargers have allowed a receiving touchdown to a tight end in 8 of 12 games so far this season. And while many of you may be looking at that as a positive sign for Hayden Hurst, maybe his ability to score, and while yes, that is true, in the red zone, he definitely has a chance to score, but we have to look at the way Hayden Hurst has been getting his production on this season. Currently, Hayden Hurst ranks 81st in red zone targets. Through 12 games this season, he's only been able to garner 9 targets in that area of the field. Most of his production has come from moderate volume, moderate receiving yards, an area where the LA Chargers are actually a bit stingy in, which is going to cause a situation where it's strength versus strength and weakness versus weakness. Does Hayden Hurst have the ability to score in the red zone against this defense? Definitely, but he's going to have to bring in a different package than what we've been seeing because the offense really hasn't been utilizing Hayden Hurst in that way. Outside of Hurst, there's really only 2 tight ends that I have a bit of concern with. One, of course, Dallas Goedert. We gave him his own segment earlier, so you know exactly how I feel about him. Please take notice that he still is ranked inside the top 12, so still is one of the premier options despite all of his adversities. But if you have any of the tight ends that we have ranked ahead of him, we would definitely elect for that other option. Tight end 13 though, we have Logan Thomas. He faces San Francisco, who is currently the stingiest defense to opposing tight ends. On the season, there have only been 3 games in which they've allowed a receiving touchdown, 3 games in which a tight end has been able to eclipse 4 receptions, and just 2 games where a tight end has gone over 44 receiving yards. The level of competition that the San Francisco 49ers have faced at that position has also been pretty high. We have names like Tyler Higbee, Jared Cook, Robert Tonyan, Mike Gesicki, and even Evan Engram. While Thomas has been very productive with Alex Smith, even scoring a receiving touchdown in back-to-back weeks, I'm just a little bit concerned with his safety and also his upside because many of those tight ends I just listed are consistently in the top 12 and almost all of them had poor games as a result. Alright guys, we're moving over to quarterbacks, and similarly to tight ends, I did want to take a moment to discuss a couple polarizing players. Each of these 2 players is on pretty opposite sides of the spectrum. To start, of course, we have Justin Herbert of the LA Chargers. Justin Herbert is listed as one of the top players consistently on playoff rosters, so it's very likely if you have Justin Herbert, he helped get you to where you are, and now heading into week 14, we have some questions on whether we can trust him. Elephant in the room here, 2 of Justin Herbert's worst performances on the season have come in back-to-back weeks. Very unfortunate timing heading right into the fantasy playoffs. Well, as you'll be able to tell from our ranking coming up very soon, or maybe you check the website to see exactly how we value Herbert, we're definitely expecting a bounce back performance from him this week. I already told you exactly how high I am on Hunter Henry. We have Keenan Allen ranked inside the top 5 as well, and when it comes to the fantasy points the Atlanta Falcons have been allowing to quarterbacks, it's outrageous. The Atlanta Falcons have allowed 20 plus fantasy points in 9 of 12 contests, including 2 games over 30 points. Outside of 1 game, the lowest fantasy points that they have allowed to a quarterback has been 18.4, and with Herbert showing that game-breaking type potential where he can completely pop off, the odds of him doing it against this type of defense, they're much higher in this matchup than the defenses he's faced as of late. Overall, for you owners out there of Justin Herbert, spoiler alert, we have him ranked as the QB7, 2 spots ahead of the next quarterback we're talking about, Josh Allen. Now, Josh Allen, like I said, it's a pretty opposite situation. Allen has been completely fire as of late, but comes into the worst possible matchup he could ask for. He's playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers, while once a team that allowed a significant amount of fantasy points in the passing game, they've really tightened things up as of late, so it's hard to find one area of their game that can be exploited. Josh Allen, though, he has a lot of tools at his disposal. He can get it done through the air, he can get it done with his legs, so if this team does find a chink in the armor, Josh Allen is definitely the type of player to be able to find it. Like I said, we do have Josh Allen ranked as the QB9, so it's unlikely to be a situation where you're going to have a better option than Josh Allen this week on the waiver wire. Maybe a situation where you drafted Allen, picked up Herbert, in which case, yes, we would suggest starting Herbert over Allen this week, but if you're wondering if you should stream a quarterback off the waiver wire in replace of Josh Allen, that's a bit of an overreaction because we still believe he's a top 10 option this week. Let's move over to the quarterbacks I'm really pumped for this week. To start, we have Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, similarly to Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson is coming off of back-to-back underwhelming performances. In fact, 3 of his past 4 games have resulted in underwhelming performances, but we're here to tell you that trend is likely to end this coming week. The Seattle Seahawks face the New York Jets, who currently rank 3rd at allowing fantasy points to quarterbacks. The Jets have allowed 24 plus fantasy points in 4 of their last 5 games, 27 plus fantasy points in 3 of their past 5, and even 2 games over 30 fantasy points through that same span. 2 of the quarterbacks able to put up those type of numbers were Cam Newton as well as Derek Carr, 2 quarterbacks that have struggled at times, so for them to reach that high of a ceiling, it just shows you what type of upside Russell Wilson brings to the table this week. Behind him, QB4, we have Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill definitely has the makings of somebody who could help carry you through through the fantasy playoffs. Week 14, he faces Jacksonville. I touched on it a bit when talking about Jonnu Smith, and Tannehill has already proven in back-to-back seasons that he's able to produce in plus matchups. Currently, Tannehill ranks as the 7th best fantasy quarterback on the season. Week 13, he also posted his 3rd best performance of this season, so he's getting hot at exactly the right time, and the Jacksonville Jaguars have allowed 20 plus fantasy points in 4 of the last 6 contests. The first time these two teams faced each other, Ryan Tannehill posted over 26 fantasy points, definitely in his range of outcomes again in this matchup, because the Jacksonville Jaguars have been getting torched through the air this entire season. We're skipping over QB7 since we just mentioned Herbert earlier, and we're jumping all the way over to Phillip Rivers, who I believe makes a pretty solid streaming option this week. Rivers, as of late, of course, has been opening things up through the air. We've seen T.Y. Hilton finally come on. Maybe they've established the chemistry we were hoping to see at the start of the season. They also have really solid receiving options behind T.Y. Hilton, including Michael Pittman, who's had a mini breakout himself. This week, they also faced the Las Vegas Raiders, which just got torched by Sam Darnold and have allowed 2 receiving touchdowns in 3 of the past 4 games. They also have one game this season in which they've allowed 4 passing touchdowns, a clear indicator of exactly how high the ceiling can potentially be for offenses facing this defense. And when it comes to Phillip Rivers, he has at least scored in the high teens for fantasy points in each of the last 4 games. For those of you in super deep leagues, I still think there is one Hail Mary quarterback out there. That's Mitchell Trubisky. He faces the Houston Texans, and surprisingly, the Chicago Bears will be heading into this one as 2-point home underdogs. The Houston Texans have been very beatable through the air. They've also allowed 19 plus fantasy points in 8 of 12 contests this season, and despite Trubisky not really getting it done for fantasy last week, he really looked good offensively. He marched up and down the field. Unfortunately, the majority of the red zone drives did end in a rushing touchdown, so Trubisky really didn't get to reap all of the rewards of his success, but he still completed over 75% of his passes against a very similar defense in that of the Detroit Lions. Alright guys, we're moving over to the quarterback sits, and I just want to give a PSA. Even though we use the term sit, most of the quarterbacks we have highlighted in red here, they are still ranked inside the top 12, so in standard 12-team leagues, we still suggest to start them. I'm just going to bring up a few of my concerns with some of the players on this list. To start, quarterback 10, Taysom Hill. My main concerns in this game is that the New Orleans Saints are playing the Philadelphia Eagles in a game that has the lowest projected total of the week. The Saints in this one are also nearly 2 touchdown favorites, which could indicate a run-heavy game script. 2 of the past 3 games, we've seen Latavius Murray get double-digit carries. Alvin Kamara has had 3 games in a row with double-digit carries, so it really shouldn't surprise anybody if they're up by 2 scores and revert to a run-heavy game script. While Taysom Hill's legs are going to give him a pretty safe floor, if this is just a one-sided stomping, the upside for Taysom Hill could be questionable at best. Behind him, we have Kyler Murray. Not much really needs to be said here. The New York Giants are looking like one of the most improved defenses down the stretch. They just shut out Russell Wilson on his home turf, and to be frank, Kyler Murray hasn't been playing all that great either. 2 of Kyler Murray's worst performances have come in the past 2 weeks, and while they have faced tough defenses like the New England Patriots as well as the LA Rams, the New York Giants, based on what we've seen lately, does bring into question if the trend of poor performances for Kyler Murray will continue. The final quarterback we have on this list is going to be Derek Carr of the Las Vegas Raiders. Carr, as we know, is coming off of a monster performance against the New York Jets, but comes into a completely different situation for Week 14. He's transitioning from one of the worst passing defenses in the league to one of the better ones. In fact, this should be extra difficult for Derek Carr and the Raiders because the Indianapolis Colts are actually very proficient at defending tight ends, and in the passing game for the Raiders, we know it all goes through Darren Waller. As for Derek Carr as an individual contributor though, only 2 games out of his past 7 performances has he been able to eclipse 20 fantasy points, and in the fantasy playoffs, that's the type of production a a lot of your opponents are going to be putting up. The last quarterback to be able to put up 20 plus fantasy points against this defense was Aaron Rodgers, who put up 21.74 points, and comparing the talent between Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr is night and day different. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. We really hoped you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.